Welcome into SportsZone All Access here on this Tuesday, September the 16th, and we've got another full show in store for you today. And we talked a lot of college on Monday's show. We even had a special guest in high school, in Jared Fredenberg, and we're going to get to a lot of high school. We're going to get to recapping last week's high school. But first, there's a lot of other things going on, some headlines that are making their ways in professional sports and in semi-professional sports, and that includes in the American Association, where the Sioux Falls Canaries are playing in the Miles Wolf Cup Finals. If they win, they will be moving on. They'll be champions for the first time since 2008. Unfortunately, Game 1 not going their way. They were walked off in the final inning by Kane County, and so they're behind 1-0. It's a disappointing setback, but it's a long series. And if you remember, they've lost Game 1 each of the last two series that they've won. So for them, it's just the same start, I guess.
I was just going to say, it's par for the course for them, at least in this postseason run. I wouldn't be surprised if they find their footing in the second game. And usually what we've seen from the Canaries so far this season is sometimes it does take them a minute to find their footing, even if we're just talking on a game-by-game basis. And so I think that is what is to be expected from them, and I wouldn't count them out just yet.
Well, and their offense struggled a little bit last night, and that's kind of the interesting thing, too, is in the Sioux City Game 1 loss and in the Fargo-Moorhead Game 1 loss, their offense struggled. And then the next game, their offense just came to life. So I'll be intrigued to see tonight. They play Game 2 of the series in Kane County, the last road game of the season. I'll be intrigued to see if they can, if those bats come to life again, kind of similar to what they did in the first two series.
It's funny because that's obviously you don't want to push it out for longer than the first game. You want to win that first game and start off on a strong foot, but clearly they have a little bit of a pattern going, so I wouldn't be too surprised if we see the bats aflame tonight.
You'll see. It is big, though. You try to win one on the road, right? Because then that gives you a best-of-3 series back at home. So yeah, you try to win one on the road. We'll see if that happens tonight. Big game for them tonight. Let's talk college football and talk about a guy who was, well, pretty good this weekend. Let's just say that in the least. LJ Phillips was fantastic. He totaled 318 yards, 301 of them on the ground. And I remember seeing that and thinking, that's got to be a typo or something, right? 300 rushing yards in a game. That was fantastic, helping him win over Northern Colorado. And rightfully so, he's the FCS Offensive Player of the Week.
I was at that game, and I'm shooting highlights for our show later that evening, and I would watch these plays play out, and I'd be like, okay, who was that? Let me write it down. 24. Oh, who was that? Oh, 24. And the whole highlight section of our show for USD was just LJ Phillips, and I think that is the perfect way to explain just how good of a weekend he had. Yeah,
he was really good this weekend, and Coach Johansson had something to say after their win.
Really, really proud of him, but we've always known what we had in LJ. He was waiting for his opportunity, worked while he waited, and was able to put that on display. And I think everybody sees how good he can be when he's kind of the feature back.
Yeah, he was the feature back, and we saw how good he could be. And looking at his numbers, 35 carries. First of all, that's a lot. Second of all, his gain was 302. His net was 301. That means he only had one time where he went backwards a yard. And so, and averaged 9 yards a carry. So, yeah, I don't think there's any surprise there. LJ Phillips, the Offensive Player of the Week.
And coming off of the announcement that Charles Pierre Jr. was going to be out for the season, I think, if anything, it just provides a little bit of relief for USD fans and for the team potentially that they have a guy that they can still rely on who is still very active and is proving to be so right in this time.
Absolutely. Turning to the NFL now, and you talk about big injury news last week for USD. Big injury news this week for the Minnesota Vikings, and it's interesting injury news. He's expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks. I think it's 2 for sure, with a high ankle sprain. And It was a run that he had that he kind of got twisted up on. We saw him getting tape on the sideline, and then really after that, it was never talked about again. So it was kind of interesting when all of a sudden O'Connell comes on and says, yeah, JJ's going to be out for a couple of weeks. And that brings up some interesting questions because he's played 8 quarters, and one of them he was brilliant, and the other 7 he was lousy. And, it also goes into the fact that this could be his coming into this week. Now, he's going up to 18 games that he's missed this year and only 2 that he's been healthy for. So there's a lot of things that come to mind when you see this news.
It's tricky because it begs the question of, is this going to be a consistent occurrence? Is injury something that now the Vikings need to be concerned about with him on a regular basis? And that also kind of adds in the component of, do we have somebody behind him that can consistently be ready and perform when he gets injured? And I guess that we'll see coming up this week because he is out. I had the same reaction. I remember looking at my phone and being like, are you sure? Of course, Adam Schefter's sure. He knows that information, but I was like, really? So it's interesting.
And I'll be intrigued too. There's part of me that wondered just how dysfunctional everything was with the Vikings the other night. I get a lot of that went on the offensive line. You got a rookie left guard, you had a backup left tackle, you had a starting center who got hurt, so now you had the backup center, then the left tackle gets hurt, so now you're on the third string left tackle. I get it. It was not pretty. Will Fries, your right guard, who's supposed to be really good, struggled. But it was so dysfunctional that it's like, can Carson Wentz do something in this offense? He is a guy that has had success in this league in his younger days. And, I mean, when you talk about talent across the roster, has he been on a roster this talented since he played for the Eagles? And since then, how good was he? So I'm intrigued to see how he does. He's set to start against the Bengals and the Steelers, their next 2 games. And yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm intrigued to see how Carson Wentz does. I mean, just as a veteran, you think with the talent around him, he should be able to make some plays.
Well, and that, I mean, I definitely think it is best case scenario in terms of opponent, and the Bengals they do not have Joe Burrow right now. And so I think you kind of it's a little bit of a help
it's helpful,
in that regard, but take that out of the conversation. Is he going to be able to do what the Vikings need him to do to pull out another win?
Well, yeah, because if he struggles the way that McCarthy struggled last week, it doesn't matter what the other team's going to do.
Well, and that's the other thing.
You're still going to lose.
That's the other thing is, like, J.J. McCarthy struggled. He's their starting quarterback. So is Carson Wentz going to be able to do the things that J.J. McCarthy wasn't?
Well, the one thing that it was a perfect storm in last week's game because you have a young quarterback and you have an offensive line that's getting hurt as the game goes along. So as a young quarterback, okay, we need the O-line to step up and help him. Well, they got hurt and they got worse as the game went along. Okay, now you need your quarterback to cover up for the fact that you got a hurt O-line.
Right.
But he's a young quarterback who can't do that. So it was just a perfect storm, and it was an absolute struggle. Of all that being said, we'll talk more about the Vikings on Wednesday's show when we look at what's trending. And now let's talk about the high school volleyball rankings. They came out yesterday. We'll run through each class here quickly. I don't think there's any surprise. Harrisburg got all 11 5-point first place votes. Brandon Valley, O'Gorman, Watertown, Washington round out the top 5. Harrisburg still has looked apart as number 1 in Class AA.
100%. I think those rankings are about as accurate as they could be. Brandon Valley is definitely a close second. They're playing some great volleyball right now, but Harrisburg takes the cake.
Yeah, Harrisburg off to a strong start. You'll notice a theme in all the rankings this week.
Yeah.
Del Rapids has all the first place votes, and they kind of solidified themselves. Christian was receiving some. There was a little conversation as to who was going to be closest, and then Del Rapids beat Christian a couple weeks ago, and that made it pretty easy from there.
I mean, that'll do it. When you have your top 2 teams in a contest together, it makes everybody else's job easy because it's whoever wins, then you kind of have your answer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It makes a little less work for us media people, but it'll be interesting to see if that sticks or if Christian can move along there.
We'll have to see. They play a tough schedule, Sioux Falls Christian does. And then in Class B, Chester also has all of the first place votes. They've looked really good. I got a chance to see them last week. Baltic actually took them to 5, but the first set was 25 to like 7 or something like that. And I'm like, okay, Chester's really good. And then proceeded to, and then, like I said, Baltic ended up taking them to 5. So Baltic turned the boat around, but it was, Chester, when they're at their best, certainly looks like the best in Class B. Well, we're going to step aside and we're going to recap high school football from last week when we come back to SportsZone All Access. Welcome back to SportsZone All Access, continuing our coverage here of high school football that we've been doing for several weeks now. We talked a lot of college on Monday's show, recapped a lot of those matchups. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to run through all 7 classes, their new rankings, and talk about a team in each class. And let's start off with 11 AAA, where no surprise, Lincoln sits atop the rankings, 21st place votes. Interestingly, Brandon Valley found themselves stealing 5 of them, and Brandon Valley's had first place votes the entire year. They got a couple more this week, which was interesting. They had a good win over Brandon Valley, but it was kind of over O'Gorman, but it kind of pulled away late in that game too. I wouldn't say they just dominated them. So it's kind of interesting that Brandon Valley was able to steal a couple more first place votes.
It doesn't necessarily surprise me because of how they were able to pull away late against O'Gorman. I think O'Gorman was going to be a challenging matchup. It was a ranked matchup for them.
Right.
And so for them to be able to win in a dominant fashion, albeit how they got there, I think does deserve some first place votes.
But in the same vein, Lincoln beat that same team and put up 50 points the week before.
Well, and so, I think that is where we see the differential in votes for Lincoln versus Brandon Valley, because Lincoln's offense is completely and utterly dominant. I'm truthfully very, very intrigued to see a Lincoln-Brandon Valley matchup and see how it would play out because of how dominant Lincoln is compared to Brandon Valley's size and their run game in Levi Veskerna.
Yeah, I'll be intrigued to see how that matchup lines up too. Now, interesting you bring that up. That game is 2 weeks from Friday, and we actually have it live. We talked to Brandon Valley and we said, hey, we want to do this live. It's a 6 p.m. start. Can we make it 6:30 so it's after the news so we can put it on TV? And they said, yeah. And so it kind of worked out. We're really excited to have a Brandon Valley versus Lincoln state rematch and 1 versus 2. But Lincoln, as we're talking about them here, been incredible this year. I mean, they're scoring 55 points per game, best in the class. Nobody has been able to slow them down. Now, they haven't played the strongest schedule. O'Gorman's the only ranked team that they've played. Their other 2 teams that they've played, Rapid City Stevens and Roosevelt, are winless. But with that being said, Brandon Valley hasn't played a low schedule. So it'll be interesting. This week's going to be where we find out. Lincoln has Jefferson. That's 1 versus 3. That's old offensive coordinator now coaching for Jefferson. I'm excited for that game. 5 o'clock on Friday.
Jefferson's sneaky. I mean, they played Washington this past week. They had some great plays. Washington did give them a run for their money, as we've seen Washington do pretty much every single game. Their offense just hasn't been able to capitalize. But Jefferson was pretty sneaky. They had I saw at least 1 good interception, and they were able to find the end zone late in the game. So I think they're going to give Lincoln a fight.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be an interesting game. But it's the second-ranked opponent, I guess. They played O'Gorman a couple weeks ago. But in 11 AA, Yankton's number 1. They have all the first-place votes. There's no surprise there. The surprise is kind of Huron, who is now second place in the rankings, beat T-Area. A week before that, they beat Pierre. So back-to-back weeks, they beat number 1 Pierre 2 weeks ago. Then they beat number 2 T-Area last week. And the Tigers are playing some football right now.
Well, I remember when we were talking about Huron beating Pierre, I said, now they have T-Area. This will be telling in the sense of, are they here to stay, or was that just kind of a fluke one game wonder.
Right.
And clearly they are here to play football, which is really exciting. I mean, we love when the rankings get shaken up like that and a team kind of comes out of the woodworks. And so it'll be exciting to watch them play the rest of their matchups.
Well, and they started the year, they knew they had a tough schedule. They had to play Yankton, Pier, and T to start the season. Maybe the three, and now they have Sturgis this week. So the 4 best teams in the state, they have to play. And they're 2-1 against them. And their defense is incredible. Their defense, 7 points against Pier. They shut out T. So give a lot of credit to Huron. They're playing some really good football right now. Turning to 11A, Sioux Falls Christian has separated themselves as the number 1. Lennox was hanging around at that 2. They lost. Really tough showing for Lennox. And maybe that goes to credit to Sioux Falls Christian as to how well they played, picking up that shutout victory over the Orioles last week in our game of the week.
Yeah, it was a tight game. I mean, there was only 2 scores, so
yeah.
it definitely wasn't a bad contest. So I mean, we'll see. I guess Lennox is still in 3rd place. They still have some room to grow, and Sioux Falls Christian just kind of dominated from the back half of that game.
Well, the big thing was Sioux Falls Christian made a few bounces go their way and then got a few bounces to go their way. I mean, it was a 10-0 game when Lennox's DB got a hand on the ball, got a ball thrown right to him, and it was a pick 6. He had blockers in front of him, and he dropped it. Well, that would have made it a 10-7, right? So the bounces went Christian's way, and then they sealed it off by playing good defense with that as well. In 11B, quickly we'll run through this. Elk Point Jefferson 1, Wagner 2, St. Thomas More 3, Mobridge Brolick 4, Winner 5. Elk Point Jefferson beat Winner this week in that really good matchup. Ended up 20-8, I think was the final score. And then Wagner also sitting second with another nice win there. And so 11B kind of shaking up the way I think it should.
I think 11B is really the most vastly spread out conference at this point in the season that we've seen. You see the top 3 teams are receiving first place votes.
Right.
So it's a testament to the kind of football that all of those teams are able to play.
Certainly. And there is 6 teams undefeated yet in the class. So yeah, there's some talent. We'll keep an eye on that class, and we'll certainly keep a close eye on that class, but we're also going to need to keep a close eye on 9-man. A lot going on in those classes. We'll talk about that when we come back to SportsZone All Access. Welcome back to SportsZone All Access. Grant Sweeter, Kelsey Dennehy here on this Tuesday, September the 16th. And we're talking high school football today. We just recapped all the 11-man rankings and stuff. Pretty simple. We're going to do the 9-man now. And we start in 9AA, where this class has seen so much shaking up, right? Parkston was at the top, and then they got moved down. And Elkton Lake Benton was at the top preseason, and they get bumped off by Freeman Marion Academy. Freeman Academy, to say it all right. There's just been a lot of shakeups in this class this year. Right now, we think we have it right, but that's the fun part about rankings is they're always changing.
They're always subject to change, and that's my favorite part about football season is we were just talking about it earlier, seeing how things shake out. And right now, I think this is probably the most accurate rankings that we've seen.
Yeah, certainly.
Which I would hope so, because it's the newest rankings.
Yeah, right.
But I think in terms of just overall play, I think this is an accurate set of rankings for 9AA.
And an interesting thing, we talk about all the shifting in this class. One team that's been pretty constant is Hamlin. They've been there at number 2 the entire season. Yep. And so this is the defending state champs. People questioned, they lost a bunch of players. They also got Jackson Wadsworth back, who's one of the best players in the state. Here they are casually scoring 41 points per game and giving up 6 points per game. And they have blown out opponents on their way to 4-0 and playing some good ones. Great Plains Lutheran, who was undefeated. They beat a good Hanson team as well. Hamlin just, I don't know if a defending champ can quietly be sitting there undefeated, but they kind of are this year.
It is kind of quiet in the sense that the rest of the rankings have been shaken up the past couple of weeks, and they haven't. They have stayed consistent. And so when there's a lot of noise going on in the different classes, it is kind of quiet when you're not changing too much.
Talk about another class that actually saw no change, none whatsoever. Wall stays 1, Warner stays 2, Alcester-Hudson stays 3, Platte Geddes 4, Howard 5. Pretty simple. There was no change at all in this class, and I think rightfully so. Wall is blowing the doors off of people. They find themselves 58 points per game and allowing 6 points per game. But the team I want to talk about is the Alcester-Hudson Cubs. They are actually the number 1 seed currently in 9A because they have the most seed points because they've played a loaded schedule. They beat Howard, they beat Centerville, a struggling Irene Wakanda team, and then they went and beat a ranked Viborg Hurley team in a class above them. This Cubs team has been legit all season long, and I've been on the bandwagon for them for a while now.
Well, talk about consistency. I mean, that's the consistency that you're looking for as a coach and as a team heading into this season. I mean, Howard is always going to be difficult no matter what their roster looks like because of the foundation that they have set in that program.
Alcester made us question that, right? Because remember, Alcester came out and hit them in the mouth right away, and we went, is Howard down this year? And then we've seen what Howard has done since then. They've won the next 3 games, but at the moment we went, how good is Alcester? You know,
right? Well, and to Alcester's point, they've been very good, and being able to get that win. I mean, Howard definitely has had some things to work through with a younger team this year. And so I think they had a little bit of an advantage catching them at the beginning of the season. But still, beating Howard is a big deal.
It was a big deal, and they've played well. In 9B, this one stayed the same as well, running through that. I believe Harry had re-jumped Falkton area. Those two have been bouncing back and forth. 1, 2, 3 have been identical the entire time, and rightfully so. I think those 3 are the best 3 teams in the state. And one that we had a chance to see last week was Del Rapids St. Mary, who continues to pummel teams. I mean, they're rolling teams right now.
That was an interesting one. They the beginning of the game, which was part of the game that I was at. They the Hawks kept themselves in it there. St. Mary definitely had, it was to their own fault, 3 penalties in a row where their O-line started too early, and so constantly being pushed back. They start 1st and 35, move the ball all the way up the field. They get to 1st and goal. Everyone's kind of like, all right, here we go. The Hawks stopped them at 4th and goal, and they turned the ball over on downs. Now, they did go on to score a touchdown their next possession, but it was definitely shocking. You look around, and everybody in the stands was kind of like, what is going on? The coaches on St. Mary's side were quite unhappy, but they were able to turn that around and still put up quite a few numbers after that.
Yeah, they obviously figured it out pretty well after that. And before we go, here's what's coming up tonight on KELOLAND Sports. We'll have a story about the greats of the game who came and played this cool tournament at the Sanford International. We'll have highlights from the City Golf Round 2 and Del Rapids playing Canton. Well, that does it for us. Thanks for tuning into the KELOLAND Sports Zone, and have a good day. We'll see you back here on Wednesday.